In 2019, a Colombian farmer made a phone call. On the other end was Professor Gert Kiema, a plant pathologist in the Netherlands. The farmers described leaves going yellow and plants collapsing in neat and tragic rows. Kiema knew immediately what it was. Within weeks, Colombia declared a national state of emergency. It was the Panama disease. The newest strain is called Tropical Race 4, or TR4. It is one of the most destructive crop diseases on Earth, according to the United Nations. The fungal disease will go and infect the roots of the vascular system of the bananas. And once the soil is being reached in the banana plantations, the soil won't be used again for decades onward. According to estimates, losses due to Panama disease have already reached $18.2 billion. The reason for all that is very simple. Bananas are a monoculture. You see, the bananas that we eat and love aren't grown from seeds. They're cut off from the mother plant and replanted into the soil so that every single banana we eat are completely genetically identical. They're also fairly identical in appearance and taste, and that is why we all love it. But that is exactly why bananas are now having the problem. And the fact is, bananas are now really going extinct. But now let me ask you a question. If our bananas disappeared tomorrow, would it really matter? I mean, it's just a fruit, right? It's not like we're going to need it every day and eat it every day. But that's the wrong answer. Bananas do matter. Bananas are the fourth most important food crop in the world. In places like East Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America, bananas are their most important food export, and they make up the diets of more than 400 million people and their source of income. For them, bananas are a living. They're not just what we eat in lunch boxes or in vegan diets. For them, bananas are breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Cooking bananas, called plantains, are the backbone of Western Caribbean dishes and West African dishes. Other kinds of bananas, like steamed green bananas, make up the backbone of a lot of West African diets. But they are all going to disappear. Farmers are already feeling the impact of disappearing of their bananas. For a Zimbabwe farmer named Moses, he had a 4-hectare farm, and his 4-hectare banana plantation fed his entire community. That means young workers are receiving jobs from him. And he was using his bananas to feed every single person in the market. But these are now all disappearing. Moses the Samanga described all his plants gradually dying, and that meant workers are no longer able to find jobs, and people in his community are really starving. Babies are starving because bananas are going extinct. That is really problematic. But how did we get here? You see, the bananas that we had 100 years ago aren't really the ones that are eaten today. They're called the Big Mike. The Big Mike, according to those who are fortunate enough to have tasted it, are far more flavorful and rich than today's bananas. They would even describe the Big Mike as tasting like banana ice cream. That's a very rich taste for them. And those who farmed them, the United Fruit Company, they had banana empires that stretched across entire continents, and they raked in billions, if not trillions of dollars every year, and they were satisfying the hands of big corporations. But there was only one problem. Their bananas was planted as a monoculture. Every banana were identical, and in 1927, disaster struck. The the original Panama disease began spreading through their plantations. And by 1950s, bananas, for them, were commercially extinct. But why do we still have bananas today? It was because they were fortunate enough to find a replacement for the Big Mike. It was called the Cavendish banana. Now, the Cavendish banana was a lot less tasty and a lot less rich than the Big Mike. Those who have tasted it would describe it as a far blander, and they would definitely not like this kind of bananas. But the United Fruit Company did something very different. They implemented one of the fiercest marketing campaigns ever seen in history just to promote the sale of the Big Mike, of the Cavendish. Look, they literally created cartoon characters for Cavendish, and consumers ate it up especially well. And that is the reason why we still have bananas today, because the Cavendish is right now back in full circuit for every customer. But humanity never really learns from history, do we? The Cavendish right now are still genetically identical because we still plant them as monoculture. That is what's happened with humanity. It is very funny, in my opinion. And right now, there is one more problem. Because of industrialization, we have the thing called climate change. For climate change, it was very disastrous because for bananas, they require a very delicate balance of temperature. Typically, bananas would require about 15 to 35 degrees Celsius of temperature to survive well, and they require a delicate balance of moisture and heat. Too little moisture will result in drought, and too much moisture results in fungal disease spreading very, very rapidly. And that means sustainable kinds of climate are no longer easy to protect. And for farmers, the stakes are personal. A Guatemalan farmer, Aurelian Popho, described watching her plants die row by row. Because there were no longer any bananas, they had no income and no food to feed their family. What has been happening is essentially death. So as you can see, climate change is the difference between feeding a family and starving a family. That brings us to the bigger question we have today. What is really the problem that is happening within bananas that are causing all these problems? And we know right now that it is because banana farms have a lack of resilience. In management theory, resilience is defined as the capability for a system to absorb shock without catastrophic failure. And if you think about it, it's very intuitive. For example, investors would not put 99% of all their portfolio in one single stock. And for the design of this building, they certainly did not use one single pillar to hold up the grand building that all of you are sitting in today. But it's funny that our banana supply chain did exactly that. And they built the entire supply chain to rely on one single variant of the banana, which is the Cavendish banana. And why did that happen? It's because we believe that monoculture was a rational business choice. So please think about it. If there are only one strain of bananas that are being exported across continents, it would mean that farmers will only need to breed one single kind of banana, and therefore they can standardize their production cycles. It will mean that retailers will only need to calibrate the ripening cycle of one single banana, and the exporters will only need to brand one single kind of banana. It saves a lot of money, and the whole creating process is being standardized and streamlined. It is very productive. But if you were to add diversity into the system, it would no longer be so. Because our supply chain has already been calibrated to one single strain of banana, and we have already invested billions, if not trillions of dollars into this whole system. If you were to add a couple of more strands of banana, then it's going to cost more billions of dollars, and it's definitely not what businesses want to do. So our conclusion is, monoculture is a rational business choice. we're telling you here that bananas are not the singular victim of a lack of risk diversification. The pharmaceutical companies, only a handful of them produce all of the medical supplies that we need. Only a few shipping routes carry most of the exports around the world. And it is the same case with bananas here. Because we wanted to engineer risk diversification out of our system, it means that even the tiniest trigger could cause a disproportionate effect on the whole system. And as for bananas, only a single clump of contaminated dirt being brought by things like truck tires or even the soil on someone's boot would mean that the TR4 pathogen could be spread across continents again, and our bananas would truly be left to nothing. It is truly scary if you think about it. So, what specifically can we do to prevent all of that from happening? We believe that any kind of change would require the act of a lot of stakeholders, and all these stakeholders must begin at the top. So our first solution is that governments must subsidize the use of diversification. Right now, the governments we have subsidize corn, soy, and wheat because they are the most important crops in the world, but we never really bother to invest in diversification itself. Right now, the research and development for the creation of disease-resistant bananas receive very little funding, and that is the reason why governments should continue to cooperate with farmers, retailers, and exporters to calibrate their systems to adapting diversification. Secondly, we believe farmers and agricultural systems must diversify the breeds of bananas. If the government is able to subsidize their banana production, we would have a lot of different kinds of bananas in our market. And keep in mind, there are actually 1,000 more kinds of bananas that aren't currently in our exporting because the Cavendish banana is now accounting for 99% of all of their exports. And if we introduce new kinds of bananas, then farmers will no longer have to bear the risk of a lack of risk diversification. Thirdly, we believe that consumers must get used to different kinds of bananas, and we should be expecting different kinds of bananas in our market. Like I mentioned, there are 1,000 more kinds of banana varieties worldwide, and a lot of them include many different kinds of nutritional benefits. And something very interesting that I noted, this kind of blue banana, they taste like vanilla ice cream. So they're actually a very interesting kind of banana. If you ever see them in Southeast Asia, please go and buy them because they are very interesting. They have very interesting tastes, and that's why. So, if we're able to buy many different kinds of bananas, then certainly we would no longer have the problem of risk diversification in the banana supply chain. And what can you take away from my speech today? Like we have mentioned, the risk diversification of supply chain is crucially important, not only to bananas, but to a lot of the key important exports around today's world. And that is the reason why banana is the representation of all these global issues. Bananas are a complex topic and a complex social issue that should be resolved using different lenses. And those who are going to be risking the loss of bananas are going to cause bloody consequences, because those who are going to suffer the most are the small farmers and those whose all income rely completely on bananas. And if we really want one of our most favorite kinds of fruits to die out from humanity, then we have really gone bananas. Thank you.